Today's story, Maria uncovers her husband's betrayal, starting a journey of self-healing and rediscovery. She learns the greatest love story is the one with herself. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Chapter. On the calm before the storm, Maria gazed out of the kitchen window, watching the steady rhythm of the rain as it tapped against the glass. It was a quiet, peaceful morning in the suburbs, the kind of morning that promised nothing but routine. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of breakfast. The day was starting like any other, but beneath the surface a crack was widening, though Maria couldn't see it yet. She was a woman of routine, a woman of grace. Her life had followed the predictable path of the privileged wife, one of ease, luxury, and comfort. She had everything she could possibly want: a beautiful home in an exclusive neighborhood, a husband who had built a successful empire from the ground up, and a life that seemed enviable from the outside. But the smile on her face, the one that greeted her reflection in the morning mirror, didn't quite reach her eyes. She could feel it, even if she couldn't fully understand what was wrong. Her husband, Alexander, was a successful businessman, with a sharp mind and a reputation for getting what he wanted. The world knew him as a man of ambition, always on the go, always striving for more. He was respected, admired, and, to the world, his marriage to Maria was the epitome of perfection. But Maria, deep down, could sense the distance growing between them. It wasn't loud, not in a way she could easily identify, but it was there, like a soft hum in the background of their lives. She had been married to Alexander for over 15 years. 15 years of shared dreams, beautiful vacations, dinners, with friends and moments of laughter that once seemed endless. But somewhere along the way she had begun to feel alone. It wasn't that he was cruel or inattentive. Alexander was kind, charming even, when he was around. But his presence had become a shadow, a distant figure who occupied space without truly connecting. The warmth she once felt from his touch had cooled, and the affection she longed for seemed to slip further from her reach. Maria shook her head, as if to clear away the troubling thoughts. "It's just a phase," she whispered to herself. "It'll pass." She placed the coffee mug down on the counter and heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. It was the sound of another person in their home, another life that had quietly inserted itself into the routine of their household. Her cleaner, Anna, was here. Anna, the woman Maria had hired years ago to help with the household chores. She was a quiet presence, a woman of few words, yet always there when needed. Over the years, Maria had grown accustomed to Anna's presence. The woman was a hard worker, efficient and respectful. Anna was young, in her early 20s, and lived a simple life. She was from a small village, and her family had struggled. For years, the job at the mansion had seemed like a dream to her, a chance to escape the poverty she had known. Maria had never paid much attention to Anna's personal life, other than the occasional mention of a family member or a brief story about her humble beginnings. Anna was just another part of the machinery that kept the house running smoothly. But lately Maria had noticed something in Anna's demeanor that was harder to ignore. There was a subtle change in the way she moved through the house, a quiet tension that seemed to linger in the air whenever Anna was around. It was as if there was something unspoken, a secret she was holding back, though Maria couldn't put her finger on it. "Good morning, Maria," Anna said softly, entering the kitchen with a basket of laundry. Maria smiled, trying to push the unease away. "Good morning, Anna. Did you sleep well?" Anna nodded, her expression neutral. "Yes, thank you." Maria's eyes drifted to the clock on the wall, noting that Alexander should be downstairs soon. He was always punctual when it came to his business calls or meetings. She tried not to think too much about him, about the growing sense of emotional distance she had been feeling. Instead, she focused on Anna. "Is everything set for today? The living room needs dusting, and the dining area could use a good vacuuming." Anna nodded again, her response polite and brief. It wasn't like her to be this quiet. Normally, Anna would offer a few words here and there, perhaps a laugh, a small comment about the weather or a new recipe she had tried. But today, she was distant, almost as if she were lost in thought. Maria frowned slightly. "Is everything okay, Anna?" For a moment, Anna hesitated, her eyes flickering briefly to the hallway where Alexander's study door stood ajar. Then, without saying a word, Anna simply smiled. "Everything is fine, Maria. I'll get started on the cleaning." Maria watched her for a moment longer, but when the silence stretched out, she decided to focus on the present. She had a husband who loved her, didn't she? She had everything she could possibly need. Whatever unease she felt was likely just her mind playing tricks. She had always been the kind to overthink, to let small worries balloon into bigger ones. She turned back to the coffee maker, pouring herself another cup, when the sound of footsteps signaled Alexander's arrival. He appeared in the kitchen, his tall, broad frame filling the doorway. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and the sharp suit he wore only enhanced his commanding presence. He looked every bit the successful businessman, the man who had it all. "Morning, love," Alexander said, his voice warm, though there was a hint of weariness in his eyes. He kissed her on the cheek, a gesture that felt both familiar and distant, like a well-rehearsed line in a play. Maria turned and smiled, but her eyes lingered on him a little longer than usual. "Morning. How did you sleep?" "Fine," he said, walking over to the counter. "Busy night as usual, you know how it is." Maria nodded, trying to read between the lines of his words. There was something about the way he said "busy night" that didn't sit right with her. It was the kind of phrase someone used when they didn't want to share too much, when they were skirting around the truth. Anna finished placing the laundry basket down and began to clean, her movements quick and efficient. Alexander glanced at her briefly, offering a polite nod but didn't engage in conversation. He seemed lost in his thoughts, preoccupied with something, though Maria couldn't say what. The tension in the room grew thicker, though no one said anything. There was an invisible rift that seemed to stretch between the three of them, one that none of them acknowledged but all of them felt. Maria wanted to ask Alexander about his late nights, to confront him about the growing distance between them, but the words caught in her throat. What if she was just imagining things? What if it was all in her head? But then again, the more she thought about it, the more she wondered if there was more to this silence than she realized. Chapter 2. Secrets in the Shadows. The air in the house had changed by the time Alexander left for work. The subtle tension Maria had felt in the morning lingered, like a thread pulling at her consciousness, but she couldn't find a way to break it. She stood in the living room, the faint sound of the rain outside muffling any other noise. Anna was busy with her cleaning duties, her presence almost silent, as if she too were trying to avoid drawing attention to the awkwardness that hung in the air. Maria's mind drifted back to the small details, the things she hadn't noticed before, the ones that seemed too trivial to matter but now in hindsight felt like signs. Alexander's behavior had changed over the past few months. Subtle at first, easy to dismiss. Late nights, phone calls that went unanswered when he was home, messages that were quickly deleted. Maria had learned over the years to trust her instincts, and right now every fiber of her being screamed that something was off. Her thoughts were interrupted by Anna's soft voice. "Do you need anything else, Maria?" Maria looked up, startled for a moment before forcing a smile. "No, Anna, I think that will be all for today. Thank you." Anna nodded silently and continued dusting the shelves. Maria watched her for a moment. Longer. A strange thought nagging at her. There was something about Anna today, something different. She couldn't place it, but there was a certain energy around her that didn't fit. It was as if she was hiding something unspoken. Maria tried to shake off the feeling. She was being paranoid, wasn't she? There was no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary. No reason to assume the worst. After all, Anna was just a cleaner, a young woman who worked for them. What could she possibly have to do with Alexander? And yet, in the quiet corners of her mind, Maria felt that something was slipping through her fingers, something she didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. That night, after a solitary dinner, Maria lay awake in bed. The sheets felt cold beside her. The empty space beside her where Alexander should have been only deepening the isolation she had begun to feel. She stared at the ceiling, the soft glow of the moon filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. For a while, she tried to quiet the thoughts racing through her head. She thought of the house, the life they had built together, the years of memories that had accumulated like dust in the corners. There was a time when she felt cherished, loved. But now there was only emptiness, and the weight of that emptiness felt unbearable. Her mind wandered to the moment she had noticed the change in Alexander. It hadn't been dramatic, not at first. Just small, imperceptible moments that had added up. The long hours at the office, the business trips that seemed to stretch on longer and longer, the distant look in his eyes when he came home, the way he seemed to avoid her touch. It had all been so gradual, so subtle that she hadn't fully grasped it until now. And then there was Anna. Maria couldn't help the question that kept echoing in her mind. Had something happened between them? It seemed ridiculous, absurd even. Anna was just a cleaner, a woman of humble origins. She wasn't even part of their world in any significant way. But then again, hadn't it been precisely that sort of thinking that had allowed all of this to go unnoticed for so long? Maria squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the thoughts. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to entertain the possibility that the man she had trusted for so many years could betray her like that, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the curtains, Maria awoke with a sense of determination. She would find out the truth one way or another. She had to. She couldn't live with the doubt any longer. She had always been the one who tried to keep the peace, the one who put her trust in Alexander, even when things felt strained. But now, that trust was fraying, and she was no longer sure if it was something that could be repaired. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became that she couldn't just let this go. After a quick breakfast, Maria decided to visit the nearby cafe she often frequented. It was a quiet place, tucked away from the bustling streets, where she could sit and think without the weight of the house pressing down on her. As she walked through the door, the bell above the entrance chimed softly, and she felt a sense of relief wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she was outside the walls of the house, away from the looming presence of her own thoughts. She ordered her coffee, the rich scent of the brew filling her senses, and settled into a corner booth. As she sipped the warm liquid, she allowed herself to take a deep breath. The decision had been made. She was going to confront Alexander. She couldn't keep living in this limbo, pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But even as she made the resolution, a small part of her hesitated. Was she ready to face the truth? What if it was more than she could bear? What if Alexander had already made up his mind? Her mind drifted back to Anna. She had been there in the house for years, always quiet, always respectful. But Maria couldn't help but wonder if she had been too trusting, too willing to turn a blind eye to the little signs. Had she allowed a wedge to form between them without realizing it? Had Alexander's interest in Anna started as something innocent, but had it grown into something much more dangerous? A shiver ran down her spine at the thought, and she quickly pushed it away. She couldn't let herself spiral like this. She needed clarity, needed the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Just as Maria was about to take another sip of her coffee, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down and saw that it was a text from Alexander. "I'll be late tonight. Another business meeting. Don't wait up." The message was brief, impersonal, and it stung more than it should have. Maria stared at the screen for a moment, the weight of his words settling heavily in her chest. He was gone again. Gone. Just like the last time. But this time, it felt different. She felt different. She stood up, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve. Today would be the day she would finally confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. She wasn't sure what she would find when she returned home, but one thing was certain. The calm she had once known was no longer hers. Chapter 3. The Unraveling. The house was eerily quiet when Maria returned from the cafe. The usual hum of domestic life was absent, the ticking of the wall clock in the hallway the only sound filling the space. It felt as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Anna had already finished her cleaning for the day, her presence now a mere memory in the freshly tidied rooms. Maria moved through the house, her footsteps soft, almost hesitant. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap, one that she had set herself, knowingly or unknowingly, by choosing to confront the truth. But now, standing in the hallway, Maria felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. She was so close to the answer she'd been seeking, yet she was terrified of what those answers might reveal. Her eyes flicked to the study door, slightly ajar, the faint glow of light spilling out from the crack. Alexander's office was his sanctuary, a place he retreated to when he needed to work or, as of late, when he wanted to distance himself from her. It had always been a place of privacy, a place where Maria rarely ventured, respecting the boundaries of his space. But now it felt like a barrier, one that separated her from him, from the man she had married. Maria hesitated at the threshold of the study, her hand hovering over the door. She was about to open it when a sharp sound caught her attention, a soft murmur, a voice from within. Alexander's voice. But it wasn't the usual tone she recognized. There was something different in it, something softer, more intimate. Maria's heart skipped a beat as she pressed her ear against the door, trying to make out the words. It was difficult, the sound muffled, but she could hear him speaking to someone. The words were too faint to decipher, but the rhythm of the conversation, the tone of his voice, it was unmistakable. He was talking to someone, but who? Without thinking. Maria pushed the door open just a crack, her breath caught in her throat. She didn't want to believe what her gut was telling her, but her instincts had never steered her wrong before. What she saw sent a chill through her entire body. Alexander was seated at his desk, his back to the door. But it wasn't the sight of him that stopped Maria in her tracks. It was the woman standing across from him, Anna. She stood close to the desk, her hands resting on the edge, her eyes locked on Alexander with a familiarity that made Maria's stomach twist. The way they were standing, the way they looked at each other, it wasn't just a casual interaction. It was something more. Maria's chest tightened as she took a slow, unsteady breath, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place, though she didn't want to see it, she hadn't been imagining it. The distance between her and Alexander, the subtle changes in his behavior, they weren't just figments of her mind. There was something real, something undeniable, happening right under her nose. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, her body frozen in place, unable to tear her eyes away from the scene unfolding before her. Anna's laughter, soft and light, echoed in the stillness of the room, and Alexander's low chuckle followed. There was an intimacy in their exchange that Maria hadn't heard in years between her and her husband. The way they communicated, the ease of their connection, was a stark contrast to the cold distance that had grown between her and Alexander. Maria felt the sting of betrayal like a physical wound. Her heart raced, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she backed away from the door. She turned quickly, her pulse pounding in her ears, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions that collided into a messy, uncontrollable surge. She retreated to the living room, collapsing onto the couch. Her hands trembled as she clutched at the fabric of her dress, her eyes burning with the threat of tears she refused to shed. She couldn't cry, not yet, not until she knew what to do next. Her world, the one she had carefully constructed over the years, felt like it was unraveling before her eyes. Alexander, the man she had trusted more than anyone, had betrayed her in the most intimate of ways. And Anna, the woman she had once regarded as nothing more than a helper in their home, had played a part in this betrayal. Maria felt the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. She had spent so many years building a life around her marriage, around the idea of love and loyalty, and now it felt as though everything was slipping through her fingers. What was she supposed to do? Confront Alexander directly? But what if he denied it? What if she was wrong? No, Maria knew in her gut that she wasn't wrong. She had seen the evidence, the way Alexander and Anna had looked at each other, the unspoken bond between them. She didn't need more proof. What she needed now was clarity. The doorbell rang suddenly, breaking the silence that had enveloped the house. Maria jumped, startled by the interruption. She quickly wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. There was no time to fall apart now. She needed to face this head on. She stood up, her legs shaky, as she walked toward the door. As she opened she found herself face to face with Anna. The young woman stood there, her expression unreadable, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "Maria," Anna said softly, her voice almost tentative. I need to speak with you." Maria's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment she had been dreading and yet, in a strange way, had been waiting for. Anna knew. She knew what had been happening, and she had come to confront Maria, perhaps to explain or perhaps to apologize. Maria couldn't tell. For a moment they simply stood there, staring at each other in silence. Maria's mind was racing, her emotions a tangled mess. She wanted to yell, to demand answers, but she knew that wasn't the right way. She had to remain calm, even as the rage bubbled inside her. "What do you want, Anna?" Maria asked, her voice colder than she had intended. Anna took a deep breath, her shoulders tensing as if preparing herself for something difficult. I didn't want this to happen," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I never meant for things to go this far." Maria's stomach turned at the admission, her heart sinking even further. She had been right. Everything she had feared was coming to fruition. "I know this must be hard for you to understand," Anna continued, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and sadness. "But it wasn't just him. It was me, too. We've been seeing each other for a while now. I never wanted to hurt you." Maria stood still, the weight of Anna's confession crushing her. The truth had been laid bare, but there was no sense of relief, no sense of closure, just an overwhelming, suffocating grief that seemed to consume her whole. Chapter 4. The shattered trust. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, frozen at the door, staring at Anna. The words hung in the air, thick with tension, suffocating her every thought. "We've been seeing each other for a while now." The phrase replayed in her mind, each repetition cutting deeper, the pain blossoming in her chest like an open wound. Anna's words were soft, laced with remorse, but they did nothing to soften the blow. Maria felt her entire world tilt as if the ground beneath her feet had cracked wide open. The life she had built, the trust she had placed in Alexander, was nothing more than a fragile illusion, a facade that had crumbled away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them was unbearable, filled with the weight of what had just been revealed. Anna, standing there at the threshold of Maria's home, seemed so small, so fragile. Her shoulders were hunched as if carrying a burden far heavier than her frame could bear. She was still the young woman Maria had hired years ago, the woman who had always seemed so innocent, so respectful. And yet now, she was the one who had become entangled in the web of betrayal. Finally, Maria found her voice. It came out shaky, a whisper of disbelief. "How long?" she asked, her eyes searching Anna's face as though hoping, somehow, that the young woman would offer some explanation, some reason that would make sense of this madness. Anna's gaze faltered, her lips trembling as she took a step back. "A few months," she admitted, her voice breaking. "It started when you were so busy with your own things. When Alexander started working late more often. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never thought this would be where it ended up." The words seemed to blur together in Maria's mind. But one thing was clear. Anna wasn't some naive girl caught up in something she couldn't control. She had known exactly what she was doing. She had known that it was wrong, and yet she had continued. Maria's fists clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms as she fought to keep herself composed. "How could you? The words escaped her before she could stop them, her voice rising, a mixture of anger and hurt that she could no longer contain. "How could you do this to me, Anna? To us?" Tears welled up in Anna's eyes as she bowed her head, unable to meet Maria's gaze. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never thought about how this would affect you. It wasn't supposed to go this far." Maria took a step back, feeling like the walls of the house were closing in on her. She needed to breathe. She needed space. "Please, just go," she said, her voice low, hoarse with the weight of her emotions. "I don't want to talk about this anymore." Anna's face crumpled, the weight of guilt and shame too much for her to bear. She nodded, her tears streaming down her face as she turned and walked away, leaving Maria standing there in the doorway alone with her shattered heart. For a long time, Maria didn't move. She stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the empty space where Anna had stood only moments before. She couldn't process the flood of emotions that were rising within her: betrayal, hurt, anger, shame. They all collided, leaving her feeling empty, hollow, as though she had lost a part of herself. She had trusted Alexander. She had believed in their marriage, in the life they had built together. But now, all of that seemed like a lie. Every moment they had shared, every conversation, every tender glance, felt tainted by this revelation. She finally collapsed onto the couch, her hands trembling as she buried her face in them. The tears she had been holding back for so long finally spilled over, soaking into her palms. She cried not just for the betrayal of her husband, not just for the loss of trust with Anna, but for the woman she had once been. The woman who had believed that love was enough to hold everything together. It felt like hours had passed before Maria could gather enough strength to move. She wiped her tears away, her eyes red and swollen. She needed to face Alexander. She couldn't let this fester in the silence any longer. He had to know that she knew. But what would she say to him? What could she say to him? She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans, her heart still heavy in her chest. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Alexander was supposed to be home soon, though the idea of facing him made her stomach twist with dread. As if on cue, the sound of the front door opening reached her ears, followed by the sound of footsteps. She straightened, her body stiff with tension. She didn't know if she was ready for this conversation, but she knew it was inevitable. The truth had already been laid bare, and now she had to confront the man who had been her partner for so many years. The door to the living room opened, and there he was, Alexander. His dark suit looked pristine, as always, and he was carrying the weight of the day's work on his shoulders. But as soon as his eyes met Maria's, he froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick with the unspoken, with the things that neither of them could yet name. Maria didn't wait for him to speak first. "I know," she said, her voice steady, but cold. "I know what's been going on." Alexander's face went pale. His eyes flickered to the doorway, then back to Maria, and for the first time in a long time, Maria saw a crack in the armor he had so carefully built. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words failed him. Instead, he took a step forward, his face a mask of guilt, but also fear. "You don't understand, Maria," he began, his voice low, but she raised her hand to stop him. "No," she said firmly, her heart pounding. "I understand perfectly. You've been lying to me, to both of us, and now I have to figure out what to do with this." Her voice cracked slightly on the last sentence, but she refused to let him see the depth of her pain. "I can't just let this go, Alexander." He took another step closer, his hand outstretched as though to comfort her. But Maria flinched away, shaking her head. "No, don't touch me. Don't come near me." The space between them felt vast, as though the years of their marriage had suddenly stretched into an endless chasm. The man who had been her partner, her confidant, was now a stranger to her, a man who had chosen to betray her trust for reasons she couldn't yet fathom. "Maria, I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, his voice desperate, pleading. It wasn't supposed to go this way. But Maria could barely hear him. Her mind was spinning, the gravity of the moment too much to comprehend. I don't care about your excuses, Alexander. I care about the truth, and I need to know why. Chapter 5. The Cold Truth. The silence between them was suffocating. Maria's words hung in the air like an accusation, a question that Alexander seemed utterly unprepared to answer. His posture stiffened, his eyes darting away from hers as though looking anywhere but directly into the raw pain that she had exposed. Maria's heart hammered in her chest. She was so close to the truth now, so close to finally understanding why everything had fallen apart. But with every passing second, every hesitation in Alexander's eyes, the truth seemed to slip further from her reach. She needed answers. She couldn't move forward without them. Why, Alexander? Maria repeated, her voice low but firm. Why did you do this to me? To us? He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to fail him. His eyes flickered, as though he were trying to find the right thing to say, but there was no right thing. There was no excuse that could make this okay. Maria knew that. You think I didn't care about you? He asked, his voice shaking now, a tinge of defensiveness creeping in. You think I wanted this? I didn't. I never wanted to hurt you, Maria. The words felt empty, hollow, like they were coming from someone who had lost all sense of accountability. Maria could see right through them. He was sorry for getting caught. Sorry that the life he had tried to build with her was unraveling, but sorry for the hurt he had caused her, the hurt that he had inflicted upon their entire marriage. That she wasn't sure he understood. You've been lying to me, Alexander, Maria said, her voice trembling now, the weight of her own anger and hurt pressing against her ribs. You've been lying for months, and not just to me, but to yourself. I trusted you. I believed in us. I thought we had something real. Alexander stepped forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Maria, don't you think I know that? I didn't want to lose you. He stopped himself, as if the words were too heavy to utter. His gaze flickered to the floor, and for a moment Maria could have sworn she saw a flicker of guilt cross his face. But it was gone so quickly that she almost wondered if it had been a figment of her imagination. Then why did you do it? She asked again, her voice growing harder, colder. If you cared about me, if you truly loved me, why would you betray me like this? He seemed to struggle for an answer, his jaw tightening as though he were trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. I don't know, he finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been lost for a long time, Maria. I've been searching for something, but I couldn't find it. Not with you. Not anymore. The words hit Maria like a slap to the face. Searching for something? Was this what he had been doing all those nights, all those business trips? He had been searching for something, and it wasn't her. Her stomach turned. So that's it? You just gave up on us? I didn't give up on us, Alexander said quickly, his eyes frantic now as if he were trying to convince her that there was some justification for his actions. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want it to be like this. But I've been so consumed with work, with building this empire, that I didn't even realize what I was losing at home. I didn't see how far apart we drifted until it was too late. Maria took a step back, her mind reeling. The truth was becoming clearer, but it didn't make the sting of it any less painful. You didn't see how far apart we'd drifted? She repeated, the disbelief in her voice cutting through the room. I'm your wife, Alexander. How could you not see it? How could you not notice that I've been withering away in this marriage? You've been so busy with your work, your projects, that you forgot about the one thing that mattered most, us. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words failed him. For the first time, there was no defense, no excuse. Maria had stripped him of all his justifications. All he had left was the cold, uncomfortable truth. And Maria could see it in his eyes. He knew he had ruined everything, but that didn't make her pain any less real. She shook her head, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her. "You're not the man I married, Alexander. You've become someone I don't even recognize." The bitterness in her words seemed to reach him, and for a moment he faltered. His shoulders slumped, and his gaze fell to the floor. "I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me," he said again, though his voice lacked the conviction it once had. "I thought I could fix it, that I could fix everything. But I couldn't. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't enough." Maria felt a sharp pang in her chest. Was that it? Was that the real reason? He wasn't strong enough. Her anger flared again, cutting through the hurt. "You think I'm weak?" she demanded. "You think you're the only one struggling? The only one trying to make this work? I gave you everything, Alexander. Everything. And you threw it all away." His eyes finally met hers, and for a brief moment, there was no arrogance, no defensive posturing. There was only a broken man, a man who had destroyed everything that had once been beautiful. "I'm sorry, Maria," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've ruined us, and I don't know how to fix it." Maria wanted to scream. She wanted to lash out at him, to hurt him the way he had hurt her. But she couldn't. She was exhausted, drained from the weight of the betrayal. She didn't have the energy to fight him anymore. "You can't fix it, Alexander," she said softly, her voice trembling with a mix of sorrow and finality. "Not anymore. It's too late." She turned away from him, her body trembling as she moved to the window. She looked out over the garden, the once beautiful landscape now a symbol of everything that had fallen apart. The life she had known, the dreams they had shared, were now as shattered as the pieces of her broken heart. For a long time neither of them spoke. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the room. Alexander stood there, his back to her, his shoulders hunched in defeat. Maria's mind was racing, her emotions all over the place, but one thing was clear. She couldn't stay in this marriage any longer. She couldn't continue pretending that everything was fine, that everything would go back to the way it was. It was over. Chapter 6. The silence of goodbye. The silence in the room felt suffocating, heavy with the unsaid. Maria stood at the window, her back to Alexander, unable to look at him any longer. The weight of their conversation hung in the air like a cloud of dust, thick, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. It was as though time had stopped, the world outside continuing without them, while inside their lives had come to an abrupt, agonizing halt. For a long moment Alexander didn't speak. Maria could hear the faint sound of his breathing, shallow and uneven, as if he too was struggling to find the right words. But there were no more words left between them. Not anymore. Maria felt the tears welling up again, but she refused to let them fall. She wasn't going to cry for him. Not for this man who had broken everything they had built. Not for someone who had cast aside the years of love, loyalty, and commitment as though they meant nothing. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself, and then, without turning around, spoke in a voice that was much calmer than she felt. "You should leave." Her words were quiet, yet they seemed to reverberate in the stillness of the room. She felt the weight of them settle into the space between them. It was an invitation of sorts, but more than that, it was a decree, one she couldn't take back even if she wanted to. Alexander didn't respond right away. Maria heard him shift, the sound of his shoes scraping across the floor as he moved closer. She didn't want to face him. She didn't want to look into his eyes, see the pain in them, the remorse, because it wasn't enough. None of it was enough to make up for the betrayal, for the lies, for the months of emotional neglect. "I know I don't deserve it, but please, Maria." Alexander's voice broke through the stillness, low and pleading. "Let me fix this. Let me make it right. I'll do anything." Maria swallowed hard, fighting the lump in her throat. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and she finally turned to face him, her eyes cold, her expression a mask of hurt and anger. "You don't get to fix this, Alexander," she said, each word coming out like an indictment. "You've already broken it beyond repair. There's no fixing what's been done." His eyes searched hers, desperate, as if he could somehow convince her to forgive him, to believe that everything could be undone. But Maria knew better. The trust they had once shared was gone, crumbled into dust. The foundation of their marriage had been shattered, and there was no rebuilding it. "Maria, I'm begging you," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I can't lose you. I love you. I always have. Please, just give me a chance to make it right." Maria's heart twisted at the sincerity in his voice, but it was not enough. It would never be enough. She had spent too many years overlooking the small cracks, the warning signs, convinced that love and loyalty could cover them up. But now, standing here, with the truth laid bare before her, she realized just how wrong she had been. She shook, her head, her eyes stinging with the weight of everything she had just uncovered. "You can't love me, Alexander. Not if you're capable of doing this to me. Not if you could betray me like this, not just once but over and over again." His face contorted with guilt and frustration, but he didn't know what else to say. There was nothing left for him to say. Maria stepped back, taking a deep breath. "I want you to leave. Now." The finality of her words hit him like a slap, and for a moment he just stood there, rooted to the spot, staring at her as if waiting for some sign that she would change her mind. But Maria was resolute. She had made her decision, and as much as it hurt, as much as it felt like her heart was breaking into a million pieces, she knew it was the right one. Alexander's shoulders slumped in defeat, and he slowly turned toward the door. Maria watched him, feeling a strange numbness settling over her. It wasn't anger anymore, nor was it sadness. It was something else. A quiet, insistent emptiness, as though the part of her that had once loved him so completely had already been ripped away. There was nothing left to feel for him. When Alexander reached the door, he hesitated. I'll give you space," he said, his voice hoarse. "I don't know what to say, but I'm sorry, Maria, I truly am." Maria didn't respond. She simply watched him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her heart heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. She wanted to say something. She wanted to scream at him, to ask him how he could do this, how he could destroy everything they had, but the words wouldn't come. She had nothing left to say to him. He opened the door slowly and stepped out, his back to her as he disappeared into the hallway. And just like that, it was over. Maria stood there, staring at the empty doorway, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She was alone. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt necessary. She had been living in a lie for far too long. But now, there was no more pretending. There was no more waiting for the man she had loved to come back, to fix what he had broken. The reality of her situation hit her like a wave, but for the first time she didn't feel like she was drowning. She was free. Maria stood in the middle of the room, her thoughts racing as the reality of what had just happened sank in. She had just kicked the man she had loved for so many years out of her life, the man who had been her partner, her confidant, her lover, the father of their children. She had given him everything, and he had thrown it all away for a fleeting, selfish desire. And yet, in the aftermath of it all, there was no relief. There was no catharsis. The pain still lingered, like an open wound that would take time to heal. She wasn't sure how long it would take or if it would ever fully heal. But in this moment, standing in the quiet of their empty home, Maria knew one thing for certain. She would survive. And that survival, that quiet strength, would be enough to carry her forward. Chapter 7. The Strength to Begin Again. The days following Alexander's departure were a blur. Maria barely slept, her mind swirling with a chaotic mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. Anger, grief, confusion, and something deeper, a profound sense of loss. Not just for her marriage, but for the woman she had been. The woman who had trusted so easily, who had believed that love could conquer all. That woman felt like a stranger now, and Maria wasn't sure how to reconcile that version of herself with the one she had to become. Each day she moved through the motions of her life, The routines that had once brought her comfort, now feeling foreign, almost hollow. The house, once a place of shared memories, now felt like a quiet monument to the life she had lost. It was the same house, the same rooms, the same furniture, but nothing felt the same. She would walk into the kitchen and remember the mornings, when she and Alexander had shared coffee, the subtle touch of his hand against hers, the easy conversation that had once flowed between them. But those moments were gone now, gone like the days when everything had felt safe, when she had felt secure in their love. Anna, too, had been gone. Maria hadn't seen her since that day of confrontation. The young woman had left with nothing, more than a simple apology, but Maria couldn't help but wonder if Anna felt the same guilt, the same regret. She had been a part of the betrayal, a part of the destruction, and though she had seemed sincere in her apology, Maria wasn't sure if she could ever forgive her. In the evenings, after the house had grown quiet and the weight of the day had begun to settle in her bones, Maria would sit by the window in the living room. The view from the large glass windows looked out over the expansive garden, the flowers in bloom, the trees standing tall in the distance. It was beautiful, but it felt empty. There was no Alexander beside her, no shared moments to enjoy the view together. And for the first time, Maria realized that she had spent so many years focusing on the wrong things. She had built her world around someone else, around the idea of their shared life. But now that he was gone, she was forced to reckon with the truth. She had spent years giving herself away, all for a love that had been shattered by deception, and now she was left to pick up the pieces. But even in the midst of the overwhelming ache, something else began to stir inside her. A quiet, tentative sense of resolve. She wasn't sure what it would look like, this new life she was about to build, but she knew one thing for certain. She could not stay stuck in the past. She could not remain a prisoner of her own heartbreak. In the weeks that followed, Maria took small steps to reclaim her life. She started by taking long walks in the mornings, something she had once enjoyed but had abandoned during the years of her marriage. The fresh air, the feeling of the earth beneath her feet helped clear her mind. It wasn't a cure for the pain, but it gave her space to breathe, space to think. She found herself smiling more, little moments of peace where she could reconnect with herself. She also started meeting with a therapist. She had been hesitant at first, unsure of how to open up about everything she had been through. But once she began speaking, once she started unpacking the layers of hurt, she found that it was easier than she had anticipated. It was liberating, even, to acknowledge the hurt, to give herself permission to grieve, to express the pain she had bottled up for so long. Slowly, she began to understand that healing didn't mean erasing the past. It meant accepting it, learning from it, and finding the strength to move forward one day at a time. Her friends, too, played an unexpected role in her recovery. They had been there for her from the beginning, but Maria had been so caught up in her marriage, so focused on keeping up appearances that she hadn't fully appreciated their support. Now she leaned on them more than ever. They were there to listen when she needed to talk, to offer words of encouragement when she was feeling particularly low, to remind her of the strength she had within her, even when she doubted it. One evening, a few months after Alexander had left, Maria found herself standing in front of the mirror in her bedroom studying her reflection. The woman staring back at her was different from the one who had left the house that day, so many weeks ago, to confront Alexander. She looked older, more worn, but there was something else there too, a sense of clarity, of self-possession that hadn't been there before. She didn't recognize this woman at first, but now she saw her clearly. She was stronger than she had known. She was resilient, and though she had been broken, she wasn't beyond repair. Maria smiled faintly at her reflection, a soft but genuine smile. It was the first time she had smiled at herself in months. It wasn't that she had forgiven Alexander or Anna. It wasn't that she had forgotten the pain they had caused her, but she was no longer allowing their actions to define her. She wasn't going to spend another day trapped in the shadow of their betrayal. She was ready to move forward, to rediscover the woman she had once been. and to reclaim the life she deserved. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be days when the weight of everything would feel too much to bear, days when the emptiness would threaten to swallow her whole. But Maria knew that the healing process wasn't a straight line. It was messy, unpredictable, and often painful. But it was also the path to freedom. And that freedom, she realized, was the greatest gift she could give herself. As she turned away from the mirror and walked out of her bedroom, a sense of calm settled over her. She was no longer looking back at what she had lost. She was looking forward to the life she could now create, a life where she was no longer defined by the man who had betrayed her, but by the woman who had chosen to stand up, to fight for herself and to embrace the future. And for the first time in a long time, Maria felt hope stirring deep within her. A quiet, resolute hope that she could rebuild, that she could begin again. Chapter 8. The beginning of something. New Maria woke up early the next morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, casting soft golden light through the edges of the curtains. She had learned to appreciate the quiet mornings, the stillness, before the world demanded her attention. The house was calm, the hum of the city distant, and for the first time in months, Maria didn't feel a sense of dread about the day ahead. There were no expectations weighing on her shoulders, no reminders of the life she had left behind. Today was a new day, and she was determined to make the most of it. The first step, as it had been for the past several weeks, was simply taking care of herself. Maria had started small, walking every morning, eating better, sleeping longer. But today, she felt like doing something different. She wanted to do something for herself, something that would remind her that she was still capable of experiencing joy, of reconnecting with the world that had once felt so overwhelming. She walked into the kitchen and prepared herself a simple breakfast: toast with avocado, a cup of herbal tea, and a small bowl of fresh fruit. As she sat at the table, enjoying the peace of the moment, Maria realized how much she had neglected the little things in life, the simple pleasures that once made her feel connected to herself and to the world around her. For years, she had been so caught up in maintaining the illusion of perfection in her marriage that she had forgotten to nurture her own well-being. Now she was learning how to rediscover it piece by piece. She finished her meal and, without hesitation, grabbed her phone. For the first time since Alexander had left, Maria opened up her calendar and scheduled an appointment for something new. Something that was entirely her own, a painting class. It had been years since Maria had picked up a paintbrush, but she had always loved art. She remembered the thrill of creating something from nothing, the way it felt to lose herself in the process of bringing a blank canvas to life. She had put that part of herself aside long ago, as life had grown more complicated. But now it felt like the right time to return to it. With a quiet sense of purpose, she called the studio and set up her first session. It felt like a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. It was a reminder that her life was still hers to shape, that she could still choose to create something beautiful, even in the aftermath of heartbreak. Later that afternoon, Maria found herself walking down the street to the art studio, her heart light with the anticipation of something new. It wasn't just about the painting. It was about reclaiming a part of herself she had forgotten, about embracing the possibilities that lay ahead. She was ready to move on, not because she was over the hurt, but because she realized that her happiness was no longer dependent on the man who had betrayed her. It was up to her now. The studio was small, tucked away in a quiet corner of the neighborhood, and when Maria stepped inside, she was greeted by the soft scent of paint and wood. The walls were lined with canvases of all sizes, each one showcasing a unique vision. There was something comforting about being surrounded by so many different forms of expression, each painting a story, a feeling, a piece of someone's soul captured on canvas. "Hi, welcome," the instructor called out from across the room. A woman in her late 30s with short hair and a bright smile, she waved Maria over. "I'm Kate. We're just about to start. Come on in." Maria smiled in return, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She had no idea what the class would bring, but for the first time in a long while she was excited. She had no expectations, no pressure to succeed. This was for her, and that was enough. As the class began, Maria found herself losing track of time. She focused entirely on the canvas in front of her, letting the brush glide across the surface, mixing colors, experimenting with shapes. The rhythm of the painting was soothing, meditative even, and for those few hours she was completely immersed in the process. It was a feeling she had long forgotten, the joy of creating something without worrying about the outcome. It didn't matter if the painting was perfect. What mattered was that it was hers, a reflection of her emotions, her story. When the class ended, Maria was surprised by how much time had passed. She stood back, surveying her work. It was simple, just an abstract piece of colors blending together, but there was something in it that felt honest, raw. It was a small but significant reminder that even after everything that had happened, she was still capable of beauty, of growth. She wasn't broken beyond repair. She was in the process of rebuilding herself, of finding new paths, new passions. As she left the studio, Maria felt a renewed sense of hope. It wasn't a wild, reckless hope, the kind that promised quick fixes or grand, sweeping changes. It was a quiet, steady kind of hope, the kind that came from knowing that healing took time, that rebuilding took patience. But it was hope nonetheless, and that was enough to carry her through the difficult days. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, Maria sat on the porch with a cup of tea in hand. She gazed out at the garden, which was still full of life despite the challenges that had come her way. The flowers had bloomed, the trees had grown, and the air smelled sweet, the remnants of a warm summer evening filling the space around her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. She checked it and saw a message from one of her close friends, Hannah. "How's everything going? Miss you, let's catch up soon." Maria smiled softly, typing back a quick reply. "I'm doing well, just taking things one day at a time. Let's plan something soon." She set the phone aside and took another sip of her tea, the cool evening air brushing against her face. As she sat there, she realized that the emptiness she had once felt was starting to fade, replaced by a quiet strength. She had survived the hardest part, and now she was learning how to live again. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready to face it, whatever it might bring, and that, she realized, was the beginning of something new.